We've got an old hickory shed here. Can this become an off-grid cabin? And if we do, what are the big problems and mistakes we want to avoid? I'm Justin Hitt from Prosperity Homestead. We're going to do a series where we're going to turn some of these sheds into off-grid cabins. In fact, I bought this shed long ago, and it's $3,200 it cost me. $3,270. There's the specs on it, by the way. Today, this same shed is $8,000. So I've had this shed for a little while, and I'm going to share with you three very important things that we're going to look at in our series on off-grid cabin. First off, I already own this cabin or this shed, so converting it to an off-grid cabin, I save a lot of money because the replacement cost on this shed is quite significant. You can see it was a new shed. I don't see the date on it, but it's under 5 years old, and these replacement costs about $8,000. Now, I'll tell you right up front, this shed does not have a moisture barrier. Okay, it's not sealed against the here, since those walls aren't glued on. By no means is this any standard that's anywhere near building quality. So you can see the rafters are 2x4s. If you put significant weight up there, the rafters are going to buckle. The roof itself has no thermal insulation barrier. Now I know there's a lot of videos online where people are converting sheds into homes. It's a real popular genre on the YouTubes. But I will tell you, within 5 years, they will have to replace the structural wood on the outside. They're going to have exorbitant heating and cooling costs. They may have warping. They may have other things. But now, since we talk about, at Prosperity Homestead, we talk about setting up land for hunting or a cabin for seasonal use, there are ways you can make these cabins more stable and more suitable for short-term living. If you're going to live in a cabin like this year-round, you want to go ahead and buy one that's been set up, and this is probably the biggest tip, buy one that's been set up as a home, and we'll show you examples of that. So be sure you're on the mailing list, because we're going to talk about how to get a building. Tiny living or small house living is a very economically successful way to live, especially if you're going to put a cabin out on a piece of land. But again, if you're going to have to buy a building, let's say we bought it for $3,200, we convert it into an off-grid barn dominium, and then we have to replace it in 5 years, and the replacement cost is significant, we now have lost all the economic advantage. You'll notice that while there is ventilation on the roof, there is that is either where they've walked on the roof while it was laid down in a shop somewhere before they assembled it, or that is moisture that is accumulated on that roof from there being nothing but metal on the other side. And so if you don't want to get a shed and have to rebuild it, and these sheds are durable, but they're only warranted for 5 years. And there's a reason for that. Another factor you have to consider is the door frame is only 5 feet tall. And so you have to either cut that frame out, which is a dumb thing to do. I've seen it in a number of videos. Or you're going to have to make adjustments because the floor, not being rigid, needs some kind of insulation. It needs some reframing to make it more rigid. That means you're going to come up about 2 inches to get yourself some foam board in there and some framing. We're going to talk about that specifically. So you're going to end up with a non-standard size door to address that. Now, what about windows? There's no windows on the side here, so we got to cut out the windows. Again, you can turn a shed into a cabin, ventilation up top, but you want to do it a certain way, and we're going to talk about that way. We're going to talk about the types of insulation to use. I've heard all kinds of myths about using just house insulation. These walls are only 4 inches deep. House insulation is expecting 6 inches deep. We talk about how to do some reinforcements. And by the way, see this corner? You're not going to see in any homesteading video where they convert a barn into a house, where they reinforce these corners. That corner is meant to be a shed. If that's not reinforced properly, if you ever have to move the off-grid cabin, then you're going to end up in a situation where it's going to twist, it's going to buckle, you're going to have problems. So you need to improve the rigidity. How do we do that? We're also looking at, when you're at the exterior of the building, we're looking at this paneling, and this is kind of what I was talking about on the exterior of the building. This paneling will not last forever. You can always see some discoloration. The siding, look at there, there's actually no ventilation in the bottom of there. So it's relying on that ridge vent I see so many videos that clear that ridge vent up. So again, we're going to do a training session that's going to include talk, because I know a lot of folks have sheds out there already. And if you can get a shed at a good price, because I can tell you, you can pick up these sheds at a good price when they've been repossessed. Because a lot of people, their last ditch effort is to get a shed and they're going to live in the shed. You've seen the shed repo shows online. And so there's people living in uninsulated sheds. We're going to talk about the good, better, and best when it comes to building an off-grid cabin. We're just going to have a shed example because I already own a shed, and my kid's going to do a learning project where he's going to wire this shed. He's going to do plumbing in this shed. He's managing the project, but we're going to walk through the framework of what he's doing so it's done the right way. Now, how am I qualified to teach you this stuff? First off, I'm not a builder. I'm just like you. I'm interested in sustainable living. I'm interested in, you said nail mist, and then how many nails are there? I'm interested in homesteading. I'm interested in these elements. And sometimes you do need to get a building like this and convert it into a livable home for a period of time, maybe while you're building your main house. So I've got the same position as you when it comes to the need, because we're establishing a farm. I'm in a program myself I'm going to raise goats. And so I'm in the same boat as you are. So I can ask questions that are going to be relevant to you, but also I'm a project manager that does risk management and business development. So I have the ability to manage large projects. I've managed $35 million portfolios of projects. I've managed hundreds of millions of dollars of business contracts. And so I can look at the laws, rules, and regulations, because again, if you build this thing out as a house, and then you take occupancy to this house, and you've seen the horror stories, somebody's going to rat you out, and they will come and take it off your property, or they'll require you to rebuild it. So again, what do we do? How do we approach this? What are some of the advice and ideas and concepts that you can do to make a shed like this or some off-grid cabin more than habitable? I want a 15 to 20 year life on the finished building. If possible, 50 years or more. So there's different things we can do when it comes to the foundation. There's different things we can do when it comes to the building. We're actually prepping this building to move to our staging site. And so we got a base camp set up with a staging site. We're going to take you through every step of the journey. Now, again, if this isn't something you want to see, then I want to know right now, because I'd rather invest the time and effort in making this a habitable off-grid cabin, not a tiny house, and we'll explain why that's important, not an actual house where you'd have a full-time occupancy, but an off-grid cabin as part of either a hunting camp or a farm property or some kind of outpost that you might be establishing for weekends, holidays, and getaways. Now again, could you use what you learn in this program to make a full-time habitable house? Well, I'll tell you, you could, but you're going to know enough to hire somebody to build it the right way. Because dollar for dollar, if you make the mistakes that are common to the YouTube videos, you'll spend just as much finishing a shed into a habitable home by the square foot as you would building a new construction. And in fact, I'll introduce you to some resources that are in the Virginia and North Carolina area that can build you a small house on a foundation that meets the building code, that has all the safety elements necessary that you could live in there. By the way, most of these shed builds that you see online, even the super popular ones, they are not fire code habitable. And what you often see is they'll get a lot of attention on YouTube, and then they'll have that video that they're shutting it down, or they're moving to a new facility. They don't tell you why, but they're going to do something new because, again, if it's not fire safe, if it's not ready to inhabit, the law popo and all those folks will come and shut you down because it is dangerous for you. Now, again, if you're building an off-grid cabin for seasonal use, for recreational use, for agricultural use, you can get away with a few things. But what do you really want to get away with your health and safety? Do you want to have issues where there's mold up in the walls because the moisture can come through from the outside into this and they get trapped behind your insulation and then starts creating black mold in the walls? Do you want to make the mistake where the subflooring, you're going to have cold moisture coming up through the subfloor and collecting on top of the subfloor, and then now you're rotting out your subfloor? Do you want to have an insulation set? Oh, so here we had this window open to make it more breathable, and you can see the moisture in the wood there because it breathed through. And by the way, this is not properly sealed. You notice there's a double here. There's a double here, but there's no double over here. Look at that. And so if we go and replace this with a decent window and we frame it up and everything like that, it's not sealed out correctly for an opening. The same thing with the front door too. You'll notice we're going to need to reframe that, and then we're probably going to put a custom door in there. But again, if you're doing a she shed that the in-laws are going to live in part-time, or you're going to have a guest cottage next to your pool, or you got an off-grid cabin that's out in the woods that needs to run by itself, this is the program for you. You're in the right place. Be sure to like and subscribe. But more importantly, visit www.prosperityhomestead.org. Go to the contact page and ask about the off-grid cabin. We'll make sure you're on the right mailing list. There's probably a link in the description below. But let's just wrap up with a couple more mistakes people make that causes them to put a lot of money into a structure that they cannot live in, that isn't going to last for very long. Maybe they're going to get 3 to 5 years out of it, that could cause health issues that they're going to have to face in the future. And in fact, sometimes these sheds are not even suitable for storage, because you might want to put one of these sheds on a property and put feed in it or stuff. It may not be suitable for storage. So the biggest mistake right now is not understanding that these walls are for protecting lawnmowers, not protecting people. This is good engineered wood. It's got a good warranty on it. It's sealed on the outside, but the headers and the footers are not sealed. So for example, there is no flashing under this board here. So what would flashing do? It would prevent water from seeping in under the board into the subfloor, and so the flashing would either go under the flooring or it will go under this joist here and then keep things coming in from the outside. Also, if a rat or a bear or some animal wants to go through this wall, they will scratch right through this wall. We already mentioned the corners. The corners are not columns, so it doesn't necessarily have the load-bearing support that would qualify it as a house or a place of occupancy. And even that, if you're not worried about the qualifications, it doesn't have the structural support that if a log or tree fell on top of it, that you inside would be safe. We also mentioned windows. If we're going to add windows here, how do we get the header straight? How do we get the body straight? How do we frame that in so it's sealed? When it comes to insulation, biggest mistake people make is they're only going to put insulation on the inside. Now in the program, we're going to talk about how we insulate, how we get this thing done the right way. And then also, finally, these lofts. And there's more mistakes. Believe me, I've watched a number of these videos trying to do the same thing you're trying to do, find an affordable housing solution that we can put out on a piece of land to either pioneer that piece of land and get a homestead started, or to have temporary housing for workers when it comes to agricultural properties or a hunting cabin. Let me just cover the last one before I wrap up. We've got these porches here. These are not actually even suitable for a lot of storage. And so we've got the head gap. So how much ventilation do we need for the roof to properly ventilate? And then how much space do we have available for our actual living space? And then any weight that we put on here, look how far apart these beams are. Now you can get away, and I'll just give you a tip right here, give you an idea of what we should talk about. You can get away with a 6-inch header here, and you double this up, or you build a beam here, and in the middle here, and then some cross bracing before you seal this up and make it a solid platform. So if you're going to have a bed up there, if you're going to have long-term storage, if you're going to have a water tank that can gravity feed when you lose power, this is not suitable. You got to, and just doubling all the beams isn't going to do it. You're going to need 6 inches. And by the way, you can't just double the beam and have it hang out over here. Cut a notch in here so part of it's resting on top. You need to build a structural beam or put in something that is going to hold the weight of what's up top there. And then reinforce the top. Actually, another way you can put the beam in is you can actually just double the width of that, put another 4-inch on the top and build that into an I-beam platform, like an engineered platform. But anyway, we're gonna go into the details. I digress. I wanna share what I've learned. I wanna share the lessons. I will be bringing in some contractors to get their feedback. I'm either gonna interview them offline and then report on what they share. I have talked to a large number of contractors. I'm gonna talk to some of these building manufacturers because, by the way, you can get one of these buildings that's already suitable to put your electric into water. Some of them even come with power. And then there's the good, better, and best option. The good option is to convert one of these. The better option is to get one pre-built and then do the other things that we're going to talk about. And the best option I will share with you, where you can basically get a suitable off-grid cabin delivered to your property, ready to go. There's varying costs. There's varying needs, but the key thing that I want to teach you in this program is if you got to buy a new shed every 5 years and it doubles in price every 5 years, then how do we build you something right up front? So you can see Quality Mennonite. This is an awesome company, by the way. But again, if you have to keep replacing the sheds because you're using it for something it wasn't designed, then you're going to spend way more money. I'm going to show you the fastest way to get an off-grid cabin up and running, to get your base camp straight, to get started on your small farm, homestead, or hunting land, and how to do it with the best value over time. Again, we're going to talk about a good, better, and best plan. Be sure to like and subscribe. Be sure you get on the mailing list at www.prosperityhomestead.org. And I don't know if you're noticing, but I'm pointing out a few other things that we'll cover in the course itself on how to build your own first off-grid cabin, good, better, and best. Thanks for watching. I'm Justin Hitt from Prosperity Homestead.